Listen carefully. Something inside you that knows time is passing, and that with every passing minute, life is trying to teach you something that haste insists on ignoring. This voice doesn't speak loudly, it whispers. It's the same one that arises when you feel like you're living on autopilot, repeating days that resemble one another, copies of one. This voice is ancient, deep, and if you stop to listen, you'll realize it comes from a place Carl Jung called the unconscious, the vast territory where forces that shape your destiny slumber. Within, there's a forgotten archetype, the creator. It watches silently, waiting for the moment when you finally remember who you are and where you came from. We live in an age that values the immediate. We want quick answers, instant results, changes that happen before we even understand what we're asking for. We want to harvest without sowing, conquer without understanding, ascend without looking at the ground that sustains us. But the unconscious, that force Jung described as the basis of all true transformation, doesn't operate at the speed of notifications. It moves at the cadence of inner time, slow, steady, inevitable. And that's why most people feel stuck in their lives. They try to force the invisible to move at the pace of anxiety. The modern world has turned the moment into an idol. We chase small sparks, momentary rewards, as if each achievement were enough to fill the void the ego cannot know. But Jung warned, the ego is only a small part of who we are, one mask among many. While it chases applause and promises, the self, center of the soul, the totality of who we truly are, remains waiting to be recognized. And only when the self is heard does vision open. Those who look outside see only chaos, news, comparisons, pressures. Those who look inside see the silent order of causes. This is the difference between those who react to life and those who understand it. The former runs in fear of losing. The latter walks with the confidence of understood that time is not an enemy, rather raw material. Because true wealth, the kind that builds freedom, not dependences, born from the perspective that sees beyond the fog of the present. Jung said that life is a journey of individuation, the process of becoming who we are. And perhaps what imprisons us most is not our circumstances, but our forgetting this path. You wake up early, work, fulfill your obligations, and at the end of the day, feel like something is missing, even though you've done everything you need. This emptiness isn't failure. It's the self knocking at your door. It's the part of you that knows you were created to build something lasting, not just survive amid bills and tasks. Imagine life as a field shrouded in fog. Most walk with their heads down, looking only at the next step. They stumble, repeat the cycle, become frustrated, and they fate as unfair. There are the few who lift their heads and try to see beyond. These are the visionaries, not because they see the future like fortune tellers, but because they have learned to look with an awakened spirit. They realize that the fog is not the enemy. It is the veil that protects the mystery until you are ready to understand it. Time, for Jung, was more than a line of events, a spiral. Everything that happens happens again until we learn the hidden lesson. That's why some people experience the same mistakes, same disappointments, same mistakes. Life repeats what you didn't understand. And when you finally decide to stop, breathe, and observe the pattern, something changes. Consciousness expands, and what was once repetition becomes learning. It's the moment when the unconscious stops controlling you in the shadows and begins to cooperate with your will. There's a difference between working and creating. To work is to survive. To create is to manifest. When Jung studied ancient myths, he realized that man has always needed to give form to his soul. Temples, paintings, inventions, works of art. Each creative act was a way of freeing the unconscious. Today, our temples are different. Companies, projects, ideas. What defines your destiny, not how hard you strive, but what moves you while you strive. It's the invisible intention behind the action that determines whether your work imprisons or liberates you. And this is where true vision begins. Vision isn't a plan, it's a state of consciousness. It's the moment you understand that the future already exists and that the present is just the place where you build it. Planning 10 years isn't just about predicting outcomes, it's about aligning time with purpose. It's about transforming what Jung called archetypal potential into concrete reality. When you visualize what you want and act patiently, you are practicing a modern form of alchemy, transforming psychic energy into matter, desire into result. But this alchemy demands a sacrifice, the abandonment of haste. That's why so few achieve it. Haste is the voice of fear. It doesn't want you to discover your power. It whispers that it's too late, that you can't do it, that the world isn't fair. Or you believe it, the further away you become from your center. But the self doesn't fear time. It knows that time is merely the space necessary for soul to mature. Just as a tree doesn't rush to grow, the awakened mind also learns to wait because it has already seen what's coming. Long-term vision is, therefore, a spiritual act. It requires faith in something that doesn't yet exist in the physical world, but already lives within you. When you imagine a better future and sustain it silently, without giving up, you are practicing what Jung would call active imagination, a dialogue between the conscious, and the more you practice it, the more real the inner image becomes, until it begins to manifest in opportunities, encounters, and synchronicity. Nothing is, Jung coined this term, synchronicity, to describe the moment when the universe seems to conspire in favor of an. When vision is clear and purpose is authentic, the outside world responds. People appear, doors open, paths illuminate. What once seemed like coincidence begins to feel like destiny, and you finally realize that the universe is not against you. It was just waiting for the moment when you would begin to consciously create, not just react. But before the vision comes to fruition, the unconscious tests its steadfastness. It brings obstacles, delays, and confusion, not to punish, but to purify. Each test is a question. Do you really want what you say you want? Are you willing to abandon the old self that doesn't fit the new path? And it's at this point that many give up, because it's easier to keep complaining about the present than to uphold a promise that hasn't yet taken shape. Faith is an exercise in psychological maturity. It's when the ego learns to trust the invisible, in turn begins to trust you. Jung taught that every profound transformation is preceded by chaos. When the unconscious begins to emerge, brings to the surface everything, fears, doubts, traumas, weaknesses. There is no true vision without confronting one's own shadow, because only those who know the night can recognize the light when it arrives. The same is true with time. Those who don't understand slowness cannot endure growth. And it is precisely at this point that the new cycle begins. When you accept that haste is an illusion and that time is your ally, fear dissolves. From then on, every action becomes more precise, more conscious, more aligned with something greater. What was once routine becomes ritual. What was once tedium becomes purpose. And life, this same life that seemed to merely repeat itself, begins to respond differently. So, take a second look at your life now. See what's around you, your days, your choices, your habits. Everything you've experienced so far has been just preparation for the moment when you decide to stop running and start building. What you do with your time is what your time. The secret is not to run faster, but to walk with clarity. Because what is built in haste vanishes, and what is built with vision spans. He who learns to see through the fog not only conquers, but understands. Understanding is the first step to mastering one's destiny. You don't need to predict the future, you just need to learn to see it from within. And perhaps this is Carl Jung's greatest teaching. True wealth begins when the gaze. Now, take a deep breath. Feel the time around you. The fog is still there. Something has changed. Because now, the one looking through it is you. There comes a moment in life when something within us awakens. Sometimes it happens silently, on an ordinary late afternoon, as you return from work with headphones on, watching the traffic and feeling the weight of a routine that never changes. Other times it arises as a slight restlessness, a recurring question. Is this all there is? You meet deadlines, deliver results, pay bills, and yet you feel trapped by something invisible, a structure that consumes your days without restoring meaning. It's the same cycle that repeats itself for millions of people, a plot that seems inevitable. But, as Carl Jung taught, the inevitable is only what has not yet been. When you begin to see your own prison, it's because the unconscious has already begun to call you out of it. Everyone knows someone like this. Maybe it's you. The alarm clock rings early, the body moves almost automatically, the coffee is gulped down in a hurry. There's a familiar route, a bus stop, a desk with the same computer, and the same weary look of someone who feels time slipping through their. The paycheck comes in, the bills go out, and everything feels like a never-ending game. Jung would call this the unlived life, the state in which the soul slumbers within a structure that has already lost it. It's the ego trying to maintain control, feigning normalcy, while the self, the inner totality, whispers somewhere. You were not born just to repeat. There's a story Jung used to tell about a man who always dreamed of the same hallway. He ran, opening doors. They all led to a room identical to the last. Each time he awoke, he felt more tired. One day, in analysis, Jung said to him, perhaps the hallway isn't, perhaps it's time. And the man realized he was running within his own habit. He changed cities, even relationships, but remained. This is the trap most people. Changing the scenery without the rush for external solutions prevents true awakening. What we call routine is often an unconscious pact with fear. We work where we don't want to. We associate with those who drain us. We accept less than we deserve, simply because we fear the unknown. Jung said that fear is the shadow of transformation. It appears whenever the self tries to emerge, whenever something new wants to be in us. That's why discomfort is sacred. It announces that the soul is moving. The danger is confusing this pain with failure and trying to silence it with distractions. Many spend their lives seeking small escapes, series, the weekend, social media. They are gentle anesthetics to avoid feeling the emptiness. But emptiness, for Jung, is not the enemy. It is the space where the new begins to form. Those who cannot bear silence will never hear their own truth. It is in the gap between one thought and the next that the unconscious whispers, "You can do more." It is when you allow yourself to stop that clarity appears. Imagine the following scene. A man, after years in a draining job, decides to walk aimlessly after work. He passes a street he'd never noticed before, sees a shop with its lights on, full of musical instruments. Inside, an old man plays the piano with an almost supernatural serenity. The man stops in front of the window, feeling something in his chest, a sudden recognition, as if that melody spoke to a part of him he'd forgotten. That night, he dreams he's playing the same piano, and for the first time in a long time, he wakes up wanting something, not about music, about memory. The unconscious has found a symbol to say, "Wake up. There's something in you that still lives." Transformation begins this way, not with grand revelations, but with small signs the world sees. Jung called this synchronicity, the point where the exterior and the interior meet like mirrors. A book that appears at just the right moment, an unexpected conversation, a coincidence that touches too deeply to be chance. When the self begins to lead, life responds. The problem is that the ego tries to control everything. Control is the opposite of listening. There's a kind of fatigue that doesn't come from the body, but it's the kind that appears even after a seemingly productive, kind that makes you look up at the ceiling at night and feel like something essential has been lost. Jung said that modern humans suffer not from a lack of time, from a lack of meaning. We work hard, but our work doesn't reflect who we are. We live surrounded by stimuli, but almost nothing touches our heart. It's as if the whole world has forgotten why it started running in the first place. So what happens when this realization finally dawns on you? First comes fear, then anger, doubt. It's the old you trying to maintain control. What if I mess up? What if it's too late? What if there's no turning back? The mind casts these questions like anchors, trying to hold you to the ground. But there's an invisible turning point. The moment you realize you can no longer pretend, that even with fear, something is pushing you forward. It's the point where life begins to conspire in favor of change. The prisoner of time is one who lives by the clock, not purpose. He measures the value of his own existence in hours, wages, and obligation, never in growth. He believes that freedom is having a free weekend, when in reality, freedom is having a life that makes sense, even on ordinary days. The paradox is that to achieve this, one must lose control. One must allow the unconscious, this hidden intelligence, to lead one down paths the ego would never choose on its own. There's something deeply symbolic about this. The worker who frees himself from his own captivity doesn't abandon work. He reframes it. He begins to see time not as something to be spent, but as something to be invested. Each action becomes a seed. He realizes that work isn't about selling hours, it's about shaping reality. Money ceases to be an end and becomes a symbol, again energy that flows, a reward for the expression of value. From this point on, the focus shifts completely. It's no longer about earning enough to survive, but about creating something that represents it. Now imagine that this man, the same man who once looked at life with discouragement, begins to dream of something different. Perhaps a small business, an old idea, a project you've always put off. At first it seems impossible. The ego laughs, fear haunts him at night, and others call him crazy. But the self has already taken over, and when the self awakens, there's no turning back. Coincidences begin. Conversation gives him a clue. A course appears at the right time. Someone offers help. The universe seems to push him with an invisible hand, and he realizes, with astonishment, that the impossible begins. Jung believed that life always rewards movement toward the unconscious. Doesn't support illusion, it supports coherence. And so, when you align with what's real within you, even obstacles become teachers. What once seemed like misfortune is learning experience. What seemed like failure is now purification. The prison of time opens not with force, but with awareness. The mystery is that the more you follow this new direction, the less you need to run. Opportunities arise in unexpected ways. The right people appear. Different tranquility takes over. Not because everything has become easy, but because for the first time, there is meaning. And meaning is more powerful than any salary. It transforms effort into purpose and fear into presence. There's a Jung quote that sums it up. What you resist persists. What you accept transforms. As long as you resist the call of your own path, life repeats itself. When you accept, transformation begins, not from the outside in, from the inside out. That's why some seem to thrive while others stagnate. Not luck, it's alignment. In the end, what frees the prisoner of time is not escape, but understanding. He discovers that he doesn't need to abandon the world to be free. He just needs to learn to act consciously. The desk may remain the same, the clock may show the same time, but something within him has changed. Now, time works in his favor. The journey begins with a simple, invisible decision. Stop running. When you stop, the noise of the world falls silent, and inner voice is heard again. It doesn't promise ease, it does promise meaning. Meaning is all that's ever been missing. Perhaps this is the true beginning of freedom, a moment when the ego falls silent and the self takes the helm. That moment, time ceases to be a prison and becomes a path, and the human being who once ran after life finally begins to walk alongside it. There's a mysterious moment when the human mind begins to understand that everything builds on the outside is first born on the inside. It's when you realize that ideas, plans, and even coincidences in life are projections of the invisible forms of your thoughts. Jung believed that the external world is the mirror of the unconscious, and that every human creation, from an empire to a small gesture, is essentially an attempt by the soul to make itself visible. Modern man, however, has forgotten this principle. He believes that progress comes only from action, strength, and technique, when in fact, all creation begins in silence. It is in this inner space where thoughts meet symbolic images that the seed of all that exists. When you create a project, a business, strategy, you believe you're just trying to secure the future. But what you're really doing, shaping your own psychic energy. Every idea that materializes, translation of what the unconscious tries to teach you. This is why so many people fail. They try to replicate external models without understanding that the success of any endeavor lies in the degree of consciousness with which it is created. The world doesn't respond to haste or image, it responds to consistency. What is authentic thrives because it carries a living spark, and that spark comes from within. Here comes an uncomfortable revelation. What you build externally isn't always truly yours. Often, it's the collective unconscious acting, reproducing patterns, beliefs, and desires that aren't yours, but inherited. Think you're choosing, they're just repeating. Jung said that the greatest act of freedom is to realize what doesn't belong within ourselves. From that moment on, the possibility of conscious creation arises. Authentic creation is always a form of liberation. But how can we distinguish what comes from the soul and what is just noise from the world? The answer isn't in the intellect, it's in the feeling. Everything born from the self, deepest center of the psyche, is accompanied by peace, even when it requires effort. What arises from the ego comes with anxiety, haste, arrogance. If the path leads you astray, it's the ego that's guiding you. If the path leads you to growth, it's the self that's speaking. There's an image Jung used to describe this process. The solitary artisan molding a piece of clay. He takes his time, doesn't force the shape, he observes, feels, and the material guides him much as he directs it. The creator and the creation become one movement. So it is with life. When you find the right rhythm, circumstances seem to cooperate. Opportunities appear at just the right time. The right people arrive, and what seemed like effort becomes flow. However, there's a subtle danger at this point, confusing flow with ease. What flows isn't always light, but it is coherent. Authentic creation requires discipline, patience, courage to face the void. Jung asserted that every creative process involves a descent into the unconscious, a journey through the unknown. It's the moment when old ideas die and the new has yet to be born. Most give up at this point because the void is frightening. But those who endure the silence discover that it isn't absence, it's gestation. What if the silence you fear is the space where your true project is being formed? The modern mind avoids emptiness, but it is in emptiness that the soul reorganizes. Every pause is an opportunity for the invisible to speak. It's no coincidence that the best ideas emerge in the shower, while sleeping, or while walking. Moments when conscious control relaxes and the unconscious can act. Creativity is the conversation between these two worlds, the visible and the invisible, the human and the symbolic. Every human endeavor is an attempt to dialogue with mystery. The inventor, the artist, the entrepreneur are in some way interpreters of the collective unconscious. Each invention responds to a need that already existed in the invisible realm. If something emerges at the right time, it's because all of humanity was ready to receive it. The same happens on a personal level. When an idea comes to you with strength and clarity, not a coincidence. It's a calling. It's life telling you, now is your time. But the call doesn't guarantee the path. How many times have you felt the urge to start something and stopped before even trying? How many times has an idea visited you, only to have you bury it under the weight? The unconscious is generous, but it doesn't insist. You don't listen to it, all silent. That's why Jung said that the symbols we ignore become destinies. What you refuse to create becomes, sooner or later, a lesson forced upon you by life. There's something almost magical the moment you decide to act in tune with your own vision. The world changes texture, coincidences increase, time seems to expand, and even fear takes on a new flavor. Not because it disappears, but because it loses control. Fear is the guardian of the door between the old and the new. When you cross, it bows and lets you pass. Have you felt this change? It's as if reality responds with small signs, an unexpected invitation, a person who mentions exactly what you were thinking, an opportunity that arises without logical explanation. It's synchronicity, the phenomenon Jung described as the secret language between the universe. It doesn't happen to everyone, only to those who pay attention. Creating is, therefore, much more than producing results. It's translating the invisible into form, giving substance to what the spirit desires to express. When you create consciously, money, recognition, and success become consequences, not goals. They are merely symbols of the energy you've mobilized. And this is the great reversal of perspective. External success is the shadow of inner balance. But there's something almost no one talks about. All authentic creation packs a price. It requires you to abandon parts of yourself that no longer fit. Old beliefs, old habits, old people. Life doesn't allow the new to flourish in contaminated soil. Jung called this symbolic death. The moment when the old self must give way to the new. It's painful, but liberating. What if what you call a crisis is actually a birth? Every profound change comes disguised as disorder, but anyone who has experienced chaos knows, for destruction, there is space. And where there is space, there is creation. With each new step, the creator matures. What once seemed like ambition becomes a mission. What was once fear transforms into respect for the force that guides him. He understands that the unconscious is not an enemy, but an ally, and that the more one listens, less one loses. Life begins to align itself so naturally that even the unexpected seems part of the plan. Ultimately, creating is an act of reconciliation. It's the moment when the soul remembers that it was never separate from the whole. The artist and the entrepreneur, the dreamer and the worker, the visible and the invisible are part of the same. Jung said that the true goal of life is not success, but integration. And integration is allowing each part of you, the rational, the emotional, the spiritual, to work in harmony. When this happens, what you build in the world ceases to be solely yours. It becomes a reflection of the greater intelligence that inhabits you. The self manifests, and you become a channel for something that transcends you. Work ceases to be effort and becomes expression. Life, finally, gains purpose. And then the inevitable question arises. If everything you create is a mirror of who you are, what is your current world trying to show you? There comes a time when reality seems to conspire in favor of those who understand the invisible movement behind things. When Carl Jung wrote about synchronicity, he wasn't describing ordinary coincidences, but the secret language between the universe and the waking. He said that when the unconscious aligns with consciousness, the outside world responds as if it knows exactly what you need to hear, see, or encounter. It's the moment when chance becomes purpose. The problem is that most people live too fast to notice. They rush from one commitment to the next, make automatic decisions, fail to notice the small signs life sends, as if fate itself were trying to start a conversation. Jung once told the story of a patient who prided herself rational and skeptical. She rejected anything that couldn't be explained logically. During a session, she recounted a dream in which she was given a golden scaraband, ancient symbol of rebirth and transformation. As she spoke, she heard a sound at the window. Jung got up and, to her surprise, picked up an insect identical to the one in the dream. Golden beetle rare, and that woman fell silent. That moment shattered the wall of rationalism that imprisoned her. It wasn't just a strange phenomenon, but a revelation. There are subtle forces shaping what we call chance. This episode marked the beginning of a profound healing. The scarab wasn't just an insect. It was the living symbol of an inner truth trying to emerge. These events remind us of something essential. Life has an intelligence of its own. What we call luck or coincidence, often the world's symbolic response to what is ready to awaken within us. When you live in alignment with your purpose, this force seems to open invisible paths. Opportunities appear at exactly the right moment. The right people cross your path, and ideas fall into place as if they were already waiting. That's why some call it destiny and others synchronicity. The difference is only in the name, not in the essence. But there's a curious paradox. The more we try to control life, the more it slips away. When we try to force results, everything becomes tense. This is when you work too hard, feel like nothing is happening, or plan every detail, and still things get out of control. Jung would say, this is the moment when the ego tries to usurp the place of the self, the center of the psyche. The ego believes it rules, but the self watches silently, waiting for you to surrender. Is not weakness. It is the supreme act of spiritual intelligence. An unexpected example comes from the scientific world. In 1952, neurosurgeon Welder Penfield conducted a series of experiments stimulating areas of the human brain. To the researchers' surprise, when certain regions were activated, patients relived entire memories, sounds, smells, emotions with eerie precision, as if each memory were stored somewhere intact, waiting to be accessed. Jung saw in these experiments a symbolic confirmation of something he already intuited. The unconscious forgets nothing. Everything we experience remains stored, and at certain moments in life, these contents return to complete what was left unfinished. This is why certain situations repeat themselves, certain types of people reappear, and certain challenges persist. None of this is punishment. It is a call to integration. How many times have you felt the same problem return, disguised in new forms? The controlling boss who reminds you, authoritarian parent. The distant partner who revives old rejections. The fear of failure that paralyzes you the moment something important approaches. Life is a persistent teacher. It repeats the lesson until consciousness expands. Jung called this symbolic feedback. When the unconscious rearranges external events to force the individual to see what has not yet been understood. It's not blind fate. It's depth psychology manifesting itself on the world stage. A little-known account, found in Jung's letters, tells of a young engineer who suffered from recurring dreams of a bridge collapse. He ignored them until one day, while crossing a real bridge, he was overcome by an inexplicable sensation that something was about. He stopped his car. Minutes later, part of the structure collapsed. This episode led him to analysis, where he discovered that the bridge symbolized his own inner journey. He was trapped between the old and the new, between fear and calling. The unconscious, incapable of expressing itself in words, sent images to save not only his physical life but also his soul. These stories seem extraordinary, but Jung claimed they happen to all of us, though rarely noticed. A hunch that makes you change your path, a phrase overheard that answers your question exactly, a book that appears at the moment you need. The difference lies in attention. Those who have learned to listen to the world discover that nothing is truly random. The universe is a living web of meanings, and we are nodes in this web. Have you ever wondered how many messages the world? Maybe that delay that irritated you prevented something. Maybe the person who entered your life by chance brought a lesson that will change everything. The ordinary mind sees chaos, awakened mind patterns, and the more you observe, the more you realize that symbols don't require logic, they require sensitivity. There's also a biological dimension to this hidden intelligence. Modern studies of the Earth's magnetic field show that our hearts react to subtle energy shifts even before the brain perceives them. This means the body senses the future instinctively. Jung would see this as proof that the psyche is connected to a greater order, where time is not linear. When the self manifests, past, present, and future intertwine. This is why sometimes you feel like you're in place with its intuition, the bridge between the human and. However, there's something almost no one understands. The universe also tests. As you begin to awaken, synchronicities increase, but soon unforeseen events arise, delays, doubts, losses. This doesn't mean you're on the wrong path, but that you're being prepared. Jung said that the unconscious doesn't hand over power to those still dominated by fear. Each obstacle is a purification, course adjustment. What appears to be destruction is, in fact, refinement. There's an interesting phenomenon that proves this. Researchers at Princeton University ran a project called Global Consciousness for 30 years. They created devices that generated random numbers in several countries. They discovered that in moments of intense collective emotions, such as disasters, celebrations, or historical events, these numbers ceased to be random. Human consciousness and mass influence the pattern. This means that the mind can alter matter on a global scale. Jung would probably smile at this discovery. The collective unconscious is real and measurable. All of this leads us to a simple and powerful conclusion. Nothing in the universe is static. Everything vibrates, everything communicates. The world is not a cold machine, but a living organism that responds to the quality of our consciousness. When you change within, the world around you changes with opportunities, people, and paths reorganize themselves as if reality were listening to your new. And if this is true, what prevents most people from living in harmony with this force? Perhaps it's the fear of recognizing that more powerful than they are. Because if everything responds to consciousness, every choice ceases to be, every thought becomes every emotion seed. This responsibility is frightening, but it's precisely what liberates. Some say Jung was not just a psychologist, but an explorer of the boundaries of the human soul. He believed that true healing occurs when a person discovers that life is not a sequence of random events, but rather a dialogue with the infinite. When this realization takes hold, the world ceases to be a stage and becomes a message. Everything takes on a purpose, even silence. So perhaps the most important question isn't what's happening to me. What is life trying to show me? Because ultimately, every synchronicity is an answer to something your soul asked long ago, even if you've forgotten the question. There comes a point in the journey where everything seems to fall apart. You begin to understand the signs, you feel that life is moving differently, but suddenly things spiral out of control. Plans fail, money. It's as if the universe is testing your strength just after showing you the way. Jung said this is how the unconscious acts when the ego tries to rush the process. It doesn't punish, it corrects. It's at this stage that many give up, believing they've lost their way, when in fact, they're about to cross the most important threshold, the point at which the old self begins. This is the phase of tension between who you were and who you are. On the outside, everything seems the same, but inside, there's a silent earthquake. Your body feels, your sleep changes, your mind won't shut up. Suddenly, old desires lose their. You begin to question the value of everything you pursued: status, recognition, the success that seems synonymous with freedom. What once excited you now rings hollow. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, the moment when the inner light fades so another can be born. And this light doesn't come from outside. It springs from the center of consciousness, from the place where the self resides. But there's a secret few realize. This phase isn't the end. Purification. When the unconscious realizes you're ready to free yourself from old patterns, it dismantles everything that still holds you. Life begins to directly show you what no longer serves you. Relationships dissolve, old opportunities close, and even the body can react, as if trying to expel the accumulated weight of years of repression. It's the natural process of psychic purification, and even though it may seem chaotic, simply the necessary adjustment for the new to enter. But what if this chaos is proof that you're finally on the right path? How many times have you felt like everything was falling apart, only to realize later that it was pushing you towards something better? Jung said that the unconscious destroys only what impedes evolution. It protects the rest. The fear of loss is the final obstacle before true transformation. During this process, something curious happens. What was once just a concept, the idea that the world reflects your inner state, begins to become clear. You begin to realize how your thoughts and emotions directly influence what happens around you. A small act of courage seems to open a series of positive coincidences. A rash decision made out of fear creates obstacles, and life responds like a sensitive mirror, reacting to every vibration. This is frightening at first because it shows you that you are more responsible for everything than you imagined. But it is also liberating because it proves that you are not a victim of chance. This is what Jung called psychic alchemy, art of transforming one's shadow into gold. Gold here is symbolic. It represents polished consciousness, a state in which you integrate light and darkness, instinct and reason, fear and courage. Not about eliminating what is ugly or difficult, but about learning to shape it. The true creator doesn't shy away from fire. Use it. Just as the alchemist heats the raw metal until it reveals its purity, the awakened soul endures the heat of conflict until clarity emerges. At some point, the game changes. You realize that nothing you lost was truly yours, and nothing that remained was useless. The people who remain by your side are those who vibrate at the same frequency as your nukes. The opportunities that close make way for others more aligned with who you've become. There's a moment of silence after the storm, a sense of calm that no longer depends on circumstance. It's when you understand that control was the illusion that prevented you from creating freely. But this calm brings something even more powerful: discernment. Your outlook changes. What was once just work becomes purpose. What was fear becomes fuel. Time, once an enemy, becomes an ally. You begin to work with the flow, not against it. Synchronicity manifests itself again, now more precisely. Ideas emerge at the right time. Encounters happen at the exact moment. It's as if the universe has been waiting for you to stop resisting to reveal the next step. However, this new clarity also brings greater responsibility. Now you know that everything you create carries your. A soulless project doesn't survive. A project made with true intention gains its own strength. Jung said that ideas have a life. They're like autonomous entities seeking someone capable of realizing them. When you become receptive, these ideas find you. They arrive in dreams, intuitions, sudden inspirations, and if you ignore them, they'll go away in search of someone else who's ready. Creativity, therefore, is a dialogue with the invisible. Have you ever had that feeling that an idea has chosen you, that something haunts you until you decide to act? This is creative energy trying to manifest itself. When you embrace it, reality begins to reorganize itself so that it takes shape. People, resources, and situations appear like pieces on a board that only you can move. This is where the awakened mind understands. There is no longer a separation between the inner world and the outer world. Both are a single field of creation. But it is at this point of power that the ultimate temptation arises. The ego tries to regain control. It disguises itself as prudence, doubt, or excessive humility, trying to convince you that it is dangerous to go so far. This is where many backtrack, sabotaging their own progress. The ego fears expansion because it makes it unnecessary. It thrives on fear, and fear only exists when there is separation. This is why Jung said that the greatest challenge facing human beings is not overcoming evil, but integrating their own power. The world around you begins to react to this new state with intensity. Relationships change, communication deepens, and even time seems to adjust. What once required effort now happens naturally. You stop seeking recognition and start emanating purpose. The difference is subtle but transformative. Before you acted to prove, now you act to express. This is true psychological freedom, the point at which work, mind, and spirit become one movement. When this happens, everything falls into place. Life, which once seemed fragmented, begins to make sense. Every pain had a reason, every loss a purpose. Nothing was in vain. You realize that the crisis, the fear, and the silence were not punishments, sites of past. The chaos was the portal. Going through it didn't destroy you, it revealed you. And it is precisely at this moment of revelation that the spectator of his own life discovers that he was never being tested by the universe, but rather taught by it. Everything that seemed like punishment was learning in disguise. Everything that seemed like delay was preparation. Now, consciousness is mature enough to create not from desire, wisdom, but then a new, inevitable, and powerful question arises. If the unconscious has already shown that reality obeys consciousness, what will you choose to build from here? Because deep down, the entire journey so far has been just a rehearsal for something greater, a rehearsal for conscious creation, and the real work has yet to begin. Everything you've experienced so far has brought you to this very moment. There is no mistake, no delay, no coincidence. Every loss, every silence, every inexplicable impulse had a purpose to lead you to the point where you could understand what previously went. Life isn't against you. It's always been trying to awaken. Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. And perhaps that's what the universe has been doing, allowing you to see what you've avoided, so you can finally choose to live different. Transformation begins when you understand that the unconscious is not an enemy. Every fear that paralyzes you shows the exact limit, what has not yet been understood. Every person who irritates you reveals a part of yourself that still needs to be integrated. Everything is a mirror. Everything is a lesson. Suffering is not punishment. Soul's way of getting your attention when you stray too far from who you are. And when this understanding matures, the outer world changed, not because it became easier, because you stopped resisting. Nothing flourishes in despair, but everything flourishes. It is when you stop running from the present and begin to act from it that the natural flow of life begins to move again. Haste dissolves, fear calms, calm clarity emerges. Jung called this integration, the moment when the conscious and unconscious become allies. It's not about erasing the past, but about looking at it with maturity. What was once guilt becomes learning. What was once failure becomes experience. The soul then stops seeking outside what has always been within. But knowledge without practice is just another form of stagnation. Healing wisdom is wise. If everything you've heard so far resonated with you, turn it into action. Start over from where you are with what you have. Choose an idea that inspires you, a change you can start today. Maybe it's reorganizing your time, investing in something you love, taking better care of your body, mind, or silence. Small steps create great destinies. The secret is consistency, not speed. Remember, a tree doesn't grow because it tries, but because it perseveres. There will be days of doubt. The mind will question whether it's worth it, whether it's too late, whether the effort makes sense. In these moments, remember that the ego speaks in deadlines, but the self speaks in cycles. Spiritual time is patient. It doesn't rush because it knows that what is true is not lost. Keep walking, even if in silence. With each step, something invisible moves in your favor. This is how the unconscious works deep down, while you believe nothing is happening. And if in the midst of this journey, loneliness appears, fear not. Solitude is not a punishment. It is an invitation. It is the moment when life separates you from noise so you can hear your own voice. It was in this silence that Jung found the answers the rational world could not provide. He realized that human beings seek not only success or security, but meaning. Meaning is not given by anyone, discovered through direct contact with your own soul. What you seek is not in the future, but in how you live the present. Fulfillment is a state of consciousness, not circumstance. When this realization sets in, something extraordinary happens. You begin to feel gratitude for everything, even for what hurts. Suffering ceases to be an enemy and becomes part of the story that shaped you. The shadows that once frightened you now seem like masters in disguise, and the fear that once held you back becomes a driving force. You understand that life never wanted you small. It just waited for you to be ready to grow. Now the question is no longer, why did this happen to me? What can I create from this? This is the true shift in consciousness. It's the moment you stop being a victim and with each conscious choice, you send a new command to the universe and it responds. A gesture of courage today can open paths that will change not only your life, but also the lives of everyone you cross. You become the mirror that reflects light to others still walking in dark. But remember, there is no definitive enlightenment. There are only levels of presence. Every day you will be invited to choose fear or trust, resistance or surrender, ego or soul. None of these choices are permanent. They are daily decisions, and that is precisely what makes human. Perfection was never the goal. Integration was. True evolution is accepting yourself completely, and from there, acting with awareness. So, if video reached you, don't ignore it. Perhaps it's a synchronicity your unconscious chose to remind you of something you already knew but had forgotten. Perhaps it's a sign that you're ready to stop just thinking and start creating. Start small, but start now. Use what you've learned to align your life with your truth. The future isn't waiting for anyone. It's being built right this second with every thought and decision you make. And when you look back months from now, realize the movement began right here in this moment when something inside you decided not. Jung said that humankind needs stories that keep them alive. Let this be yours. Let this be the point where everything changed. Because the world has changed, but because you finally awakened to the power you've always. If this video resonated with you, share your feelings. Leave a comment, even if anonymous, just to record your turning point. Write what touched you most, what you want to change, or what you discovered about yourself. And if this message spoke to your heart, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This way, you'll help this message reach others who also need to awaken. Because transformation begins with one, but continues through many. And the next step, the most important of all, depends solely on you.